Hi guys, I am Hope with Flower Moxie. Today we are going to build a bowl centerpiece with chicken wire. So chicken wire is going to be our mechanics inside of here, and we're using that in replacement of floral foam. So this is a bit more eco-friendly. You can reuse this. And also it's, in my opinion, a bit easier to use. It has a little more flexibility than floral foam. So I enjoy it for organic arrangements, things that you want to have a little more movement to them. So to get started, we are going to take our bowl arrangement and we are going to fold the chicken wire in on itself. So we want to create a bit of a ball that's going to fit nicely inside of the bowl. And we're keeping in mind here we want multiple places for the stems to go through. We don't want them to only go through one hole. So that's partly why we're folding it in on itself. So once it's ready to fit in your bowl and you can stick it in there and kind of stretch it out to better fit, then we are going to want to hold it in place with our waterproof floral tape. So I am going to use this to make sure that the chicken wire stays put where it is, the arrangement doesn't move around, and also just to add yet another place that the stems can catch. And you just barely need to hook this over the side, so you don't want it so far that you're going to be able to see it. And you want to pull it down very tight over your chicken wire. And this waterproof tape is a bit different than the floral tape you may have used for boutonnieres. That floral tape stretches and adheres to itself, where this has an adhesive layer on the underside just like normal tape. But since this is waterproof, it won't peel up when it gets wet. Okay, and then I'm going to go back across the opposite direction. So this way it forms a bit of a grid there. And getting these mechanics set up is a really important part of starting out. If you get this set up correctly, it's going to make building a whole lot easier. Whereas if things feel a bit unstable or if you don't have enough places to catch your stems, it will be harder to keep your flowers in the right position. So now we've got our chicken wire, we have our tape grid over top, and we know that that's not going to move around in there. So now I'm going to add water to it. And you want enough water in there that it's not going to easily spill over the edge of the bowl whenever you move it around, but you do want plenty that it's going to cover all of the stems and keep them well hydrated under there. So I'm going to start by filling out with Greenery, and basically I'm just going to create a little bit of a layer where that can hold the rest of the flowers in place, and it's also going to cover my mechanics. You don't have to do a really heavy layer of Greenery unless you like a lot of it, but we're just going to cover a bit of our mechanics here. So starting with some of the bigger Greenery is nice to kind of start a shape that you like. I like things a bit more organic and flowing out long ways a little bit. So I'm going to pull my Greenery that way rather than making it round all the way around the bowl. And chicken wire is flexible, so the difference between that and using floral foam is once you stick a hole into the foam, you can replace it into there, but it's created a permanent hole in it. Versus with chicken wire, you can move things around really freely and it's easy to make adjustments. So you can see that things are a bit more loose, but I'm going to get more stability in there as I add more stems. They're going to interlock with each other and be easier to stay in place. And that's a good perk to adding the Greenery first as well. And all the time you just want to keep in mind kind of the shape that you're wanting to create and giving your arrangement some height and dimension to it so it's visually interesting. And I may use some of these for more accent pieces as we go. These are very linear, so it's easy to just kind of pop those in later, so I may remove them. Right now we are just focused on kind of filling this out and creating some shape. You'll notice I've already got pretty small pieces of Greenery. I already pre-cut these so they'd be easier to manage. So if you want to cut apart your Greenery a bit like that, you are more than welcome to in advance. Or if you feel more comfortable just keeping it longer and cutting to the size that you need as you go, that works really well too. And as I have these longer pieces, again, I'm pulling them out to the sides to keep it in that more elongated shape. And these smaller pieces are really good to tuck around the edges. That just helps give some greenery and some texture there. And these are just little pieces from the bottom of my leatherleaf fern. I stripped these off because I didn't need them to be quite as long and large. So you can always keep these smaller pieces and again, tuck them around the edges and help fill it out that way. It's also good to place these in the middle because I want to create a bit of a valley here so I can have some height out to the sides. And since this is a centerpiece, it will be sitting on a table where people are viewing it from all different sides. So you want to make sure that it looks nice all the way around, and then you also want to get low with it at some points to see from where the person is sitting how it looks, to make sure that you've got mechanics covered and just make sure that it's visually pleasing there. Okay, so I have a good base of greenery. This is as much as I would like to do. If you like a lot of greenery, you can add more than this and use it for more of your shape and dimension in the arrangement, but I'm gonna mostly focus on the flowers with that. So once I get started, I like to use my larger blooms first and then shift into my smaller accent flowers. And you can just kind of vary this depending on what you like to do. I really enjoy using one ingredient at a time and then flowing through the rest of mine. That just helps me keep track of where they're going and making sure that the shape looks nice. But if you like just kind of shifting through them, you can do that as well. And keep in mind, it may take you a while to kind of get a vision of what length you should cut your stems, and that's the one area that using chicken wire is a bit more challenging. So to figure out where you want the stem length to be, you can kind of hold it toward the table and cut it at that length. That gives you a good representation of where it's going to hit the bottom of the bowl. And we're always keeping in mind that we want varying heights, and that creates visual interest in your arrangement. So I'm going to keep my items that are the same at varying heights in themselves, and then I also want my other things to complement that. So it's okay to tuck some of them down lower in the bowl, and I am going to create a bit of a valley in the center, so I will do that with some of them, and then some out toward the edge I'm going to have standing up a bit further. So here I created a bit of a triangle with these flowers, and it's always good to do that. It keeps you from making things too symmetrical, and it gives your eye somewhere to look for those flowers in particular. With greenery on your stems, you can always just do whatever fits your preference. If you like to leave a little bit on there, you can. Or sometimes I like to strip it off if it just doesn't look nice or doesn't fit what I'm going for. So with adding this many flowers at this point, it is starting to intertwine the stems, and that is making it easier to place each stem in the right position, and it keeps them in place and not moving around so much. So already they're pretty sturdy, and it'll only get more sturdy as I add more. You can also create some different texture and dimension with your arrangement by manipulating the flowers in ways that you find appealing. You can see that I've already reflexed some of my roses, and I'm going to do that with this one. So we are just going to pull the petals back on themselves and fold them in a bit. And this works best once the flowers have aged a bit. It makes their petals softer and easier to move. And sometimes you just have to hold some up in the place that you're looking at. So like right here, I noticed that I have a hole here, and I'm trying to figure out what flower will look best in that spot. But I think using those is gonna feel too repetitive in the placement, so I'm going to use some of my texture flower there. And for flowers like this that have a lot on the stem, it's good to rip some of these off, and you can use these along the edges or places that are a bit shorter. Thankfully, this one has some pretty long pieces attached, which is nice. But I like to trim it down until I've got like 2 or 3, and then I'll use that in the arrangement. So with those, I grouped them in a way that was varying their heights as well, so that way it still has dimension there. And then I'll kind of scatter some of these guys around. So right now I feel like Some of this is coming up too high for me, but I'm gonna keep working with it and just adjust things as I go. So it's good to just like make those small tweaks. So I think I'm gonna swap these guys out because I've created some more height over here. And I don't want them totally in line with each other because I don't want it to feel like a straight line going through. So I'm gonna set this one off to the side a bit, but just kind of complement the texture. So ranunculus are a really good flower to use if you want to add some height and something that feels a little more dainty, has some movement to it. They're really nice to have kind of floating over the top. And sometimes the bloom on these is a bit heavy. So if you have a curve that you don't like, or you feel like it's weighing itself down, or even the stem got bent, you can wire these. The stem is hollow, so you can feed that wire through them. And it really helps you just kind of position them in a way that you like and also straighten them out a bit. So again, I'm kind of creating some triangles, adding visual interest through those different heights, and I'm just shifting things around as I need to because some of the stuff that I added in first isn't working for me as I create more of the shape. And now that my chicken wire has more stems in it, it's easier for me to pull some things and just have them further out of the bowl than originally placed. And now I've gotten to a point that I'm really just looking for holes. I have enough flowers. I feel like I'm getting the shape that I wanted, but I just need to fill any of those blank spots because your photographer may take pictures from overhead, so you don't want things to look empty if you look down into it. And you also want to make sure that just from the sides where your guests are going to be sitting, it's going to look pretty. So I can see a few places that are looking a little more sparse for me. So I'm just gonna add in some of my smaller flowers. If you have a bigger spot, you can always add in the larger ones, but I don't want these to touch too much. You're also looking to see if you can see those mechanics still. So I can see a bit of my tape, so I can just trim that off with some scissors. But other than that, it is covering really well. You can also move some of your greenery out a bit if you want to cover it that way, but I'll just trim these off after I'm finished, and that way you won't see any of the tape. So next I'm going to use some of these dried texture items, and these I'm just going to keep kind of floating over the top to create some shape, just like I used the ranunculus for. They're just to accent. Texture items like this that are pretty small, keeping them up high helps you really see them, where if they're tucked down lower into the arrangement, they may add some color, but they're probably not going to be very noticeable. And these ones have a very thin stem on them, so they may be a little bit harder to place at times. So it's good to just find those spots that they stay a little more sturdy. So once you've added all of your texture flowers, you've got the base covered, you can't see your mechanics anymore, and then checking again that it looks nice from all angles. And it's also good to take a picture with your phone if you want to, because sometimes when you take an image of it, it looks a little more flat than you thought it did in person. So it's always good to check all of those things. And then once you've done that, then you are good to go. And we will link the recipe to this down below, and you can see all the ingredients that went into this.